In the movie, the main antagonist is 10-year-old Michael Myers from Illinois. He leads a challenging life, facing difficulties both at home and at school due to his shy and eccentric nature. His origin from Illinois doesn't help matters either. To complicate things further, his mother, Deborah, works as one of the city's most sought-after strippers. One peculiar aspect of Michael is that he engages in disturbing activities, such as killing and dissecting animals, while concealing his identity behind a Halloween clown costume. His latest victim is his pet mouse. One day, while Michael is immersed in his strange behavior, we see Deborah preparing food for the family in the kitchen. It becomes evident that her boyfriend, Ronnie, is a boisterous, ill-tempered alcoholic who often displays aggression towards her. Ronnie also makes disrespectful remarks about Deborah's teenage daughter, Judith, and their infant daughter, Boo. Whenever Ronnie raises his voice, little Boo starts crying. Meanwhile, Michael descends the stairs, still wearing his clown mask, and sadly announces the death of his pet mouse. His mother comforts him and promises to get him a new one. Strangely, she doesn't inquire about what caused the rodent's demise. At that moment, Ronnie insists that Michael remove his clown mask. When Michael refuses, Ronnie forcefully yanks it off his face. Later that day, at school, Michael crosses paths with a bully named Wesley Rhodes and his friend in the restroom. They torment him by making cruel comments about his mother's occupation as a stripper. Michael understandably becomes upset and begins yelling for the bullies to shut up as he confronts them alone. Their scuffle is eventually interrupted when the school principal enters the washroom and shouts at them. However, an enraged Michael curses at the principal, worsening the situation and resulting in all three kids getting detention. Deborah arrives at the school, but instead of scolding her son, she angrily berates the principal, accusing him of being irresponsible. The shocked principal tries to make her understand that Michael is a unique child. He even arranges an appointment with Dr. Sam Loomis, a child psychologist. Later in the evening, Dr. Loomis shows Deborah evidence of Michael's abuse of animals and informs her that her son displays signs of sociopathology. The principal found a dead cat in Michael's school bag, along with a collection of images depicting various animal mutilations. Dr. Loomis explains that these are warning signs that Michael might develop troubling tendencies in the future. He emphasizes that only a disordered mind could take pleasure in such violent acts. In the meantime, Michael flees from school and unexpectedly encounters Wesley, the bully, in the woods. Out of nowhere, he strikes Wesley with a large tree branch. As Wesley falls to the ground, Michael releases all his pent-up anger and continues to strike him repeatedly. Poor Wesley, racked with pain and in tears, pleads with Michael to stop. That evening, Michael's aggression escalates, and tragically, he ends up killing Wesley. When he returns home, he waits for his sister Judith to take him trick-or-treating. Their mother calls for Judith to look after her brother as she prepares to leave for work. However, Judith has no intention of taking Michael out. As their mom departs, Judith's boyfriend Steven comes over, and they head upstairs to spend some quality time together. This leaves Michael alone and distraught. He puts on his mask and goes outside for a while, but eventually returns. He finds his mother's boyfriend, Ronnie, sleeping in a chair. This seems like the perfect opportunity for the sinister child to exact his revenge. In a moment of madness, he immobilizes Ronnie by binding him to the chair with duct tape and brutally kills him with a butcher knife, taunting, "Trick or treat, Ronnie, you." A while later, Judith's boyfriend, Steve, descends to the kitchen to make some sandwiches. Upon seeing him, Michael grabs an aluminum bat and strikes him across the back of the head. Steve falls to the floor, convulsing, and Michael watches for a moment before continuing to bludgeon him until he is lifeless. Michael's next move takes him upstairs, where he discovers his sister Judith dozing in her room. He removes his clown mask and instead dons Steve's large, eerie Halloween mask. As Judith turns around, he runs his fingertips along. In her room, Judith becomes agitated upon seeing Michael and demands to know why he's there. When he doesn't respond, she slaps him in frustration. Filled with rage, Michael stabs his sister in the stomach, tragically ending her life. When their mother finally returns from work, she discovers Michael on the front porch, holding his infant sister. She frantically asks why he's outside so late. Michael remains silent, and in the background, police sirens can be heard approaching. The following day, Michael is convicted of first-degree murder and confined to a mental hospital under the care of Dr. Loomis. Despite his heinous acts, Michael pretends to be innocent, claiming that he doesn't remember anything. Every week, Deborah visits him, but Michael appears to be deteriorating mentally. Several months pass, and Michael continues to deceive the doctors. During one session with Dr. Loomis, Michael shows him a new mask he has made for himself, explaining that he wears it to hide his true self. His mother visits him after a long absence, attempting to engage him in conversation. However, Michael remains silent and more isolated than ever. To cheer him up, she shows him an old photo of him and his infant sister, suggesting he hang it in his room. But the sinister boy refuses to respond. After the appointment, Dr. Loomis guides Michael to a nurse's care, while Deborah exits the sanitarium, leaving behind a bleak and unsettling atmosphere. As the two are left alone, Michael's demeanor takes a dark turn, and he becomes aggressively violent, fatally stabbing the nurse with a fork. Deborah and Dr. Loomis later discover the gruesome incident, leaving them both utterly speechless. Deborah, in particular, is devastated by the realization of her son's true capabilities. She reflects on how it was one thing when he killed her boyfriend and daughter, but now, even a nurse. Later, when Deborah returns home, she watches old films of Michael from his innocent early years. Tearfully, she reminisces about those days and questions whether she was a bad mother. Overwhelmed by the pain, she contemplates an unthinkable act. The movie then jumps ahead 15 years. Michael has grown into a towering man, still confined in the sanitarium. He remains completely silent since his last murder and spends most of his time crafting masks. Dr. Loomis has given up on treating him and has instead published a best-selling book in which he labels Michael as irredeemably evil. One night, as Michael is engrossed in making masks, two janitors enter his cell and engage in disturbing activities with a female inmate. In a chillingly calm manner, Michael continues his work without reacting. However, once the janitors are finished, he suddenly springs into action. He seizes one of them, slamming him against a table, and then proceeds to brutally assault the other before slamming his head against the wall. Commission alerts the guard, Ismail, who has been responsible for Michael since his childhood. Ismail quickly arrives at the cell block and is met with a gruesome scene. Two lifeless, bloodied bodies strewn across the floor. Upon seeing Michael, Ismail realizes the horrifying truth of what has occurred. He attempts to guide Michael back to his cell, but the monster brutally attacks him, ultimately ending his life by using a television set as a weapon. Following the massacre, Michael escapes from the asylum, prepared to wreak further havoc. In the next scene, he arrives at a truck stop and engages in a violent confrontation with the driver. Michael repeatedly slams the driver against a wall, resulting in the driver's death. Michael then steals the driver's overalls, discarding his own. By the following morning, which happens to be Halloween Day, Michael returns to his family home in Haddonfield. The place has remained abandoned since his mother's passing. There, he retrieves his favorite butcher knife and mask. Meanwhile, Laurie Strode, an exemplary college student from Haddonfield. One day, her father, who works as a real estate agent, tasked her with delivering some documents to the former Myers residence. The locals believe this old Myers home to be haunted. Laurie drops off the paperwork and departs, unaware of what awaits her on this fateful Halloween day. Michael becomes intrigued when he sees Laurie and starts to follow her to college, where he secretly observes her. It becomes apparent that Laurie often feels lonely and spends a significant amount of her time babysitting a neighboring 10-year-old boy. In contrast, her best friends, Linda and Annie, are more popular and beloved throughout the school. Later that night, Annie persuades Laurie to babysit her son James so that she and her boyfriend can have a good time. Meanwhile, Linda joins her boyfriend for a party at the old Myers residence. Michael, coincidentally present there, notices the couple and begins to stalk them. When Linda's boyfriend goes off by himself, Michael attacks and kills him. He then proceeds to end Linda's life as well. After these horrific acts, Michael makes his way to Laurie's house and murders her parents, just as he did with Annie. Laurie departs for her babysitting job, and Michael's reign of terror continues. He arrives at Annie's house, where she is having a good time with her boyfriend. Michael brutally takes the boyfriend's life and assaults Annie. Later, Laurie arrives at the scene with James and discovers the horrifying tableau. James is in a traumatized and undressed state, while her boyfriend's lifeless body hangs from the ceiling. Suddenly, Michael reappears on the premises and launches an attack on Laurie. She manages to escape somehow, but he relentlessly pursues her. In the revised script, as Laurie is ambushed by Michael, her escape triggers an alarm, and news of Michael's escape reaches Dr. Loomis. He rushes to Haddonfield, frantic to convince the local sheriff that Michael Myers has returned and poses a severe threat. The sheriff attempts to contact Laurie to inquire about her whereabouts, but receives no response. After some investigation, he uncovers the shocking truth. Laurie is Michael's sister, adopted when Deborah took an unthinkable action. Dr. Loomis realizes that Michael is aware of this truth, explaining his obsession with Laurie and the fear that she may be his next victim. Driven by this realization, he makes the crucial decision to visit the Myers residence. Meanwhile, we learn that Laurie is still alive but being held captive by the psychopath. Michael momentarily drops his knife and hands her a picture of them as children, hoping to trigger some recognition. However, Laurie, having been adopted as an infant, does not grasp the significance. While he is momentarily distracted, Laurie manages to stab Michael in the neck and escapes into the backyard. Unfortunately, her action only slows down the hulking figure. Laurie is pursued by her psychopathic brother, who eventually corners her in an empty pool. Just in time, Dr. Loomis arrives and pleads with Michael to stop, to no avail. In desperation, he shoots the psychopath multiple times in the back. After this intense encounter, the doctor and Laurie join forces to deal with the traumatic aftermath. In a frantic escape attempt, Laurie tries to flee in her car, but Michael, surprisingly resilient, shatters the windshield and hauls her out. He's poised to finish her off when Dr. Loomis pleads for her release. Michael briefly concedes, but then violently kills the doctor. Laurie seizes a nearby gun and flees upstairs, with the psychopath in pursuit. Cornered on a balcony, they both tumble over the railing. Later, Laurie awakens atop an unconscious Michael. She aims the gun at him, firing a shot. Michael suddenly stirs, grasping her wrist. Undeterred, Laurie fires several more shots. The movie concludes with Laurie, covered in Michael's blood, screaming in victory.